Okay. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. A very warm welcome to today's webinar on strengthening leadership in prevention, sharing insights from the development of an evidence-based workshop. It's going to be a great session, so we are looking forward to it. My name is Rasha Abihana. I serve as the Scientific Support Coordinator at ISSUP Global, and I'm a master trainer for the European Prevention Curriculum recognized by EUDA, the European Drug Agency. While we are waiting for a few more to join us, I will begin by saying a little about ISSUP. ISSUP is a membership organization with over 48,000 members worldwide, working in the fields of substance use, prevention, treatment, and recovery support. Our aim is to connect professionals through networking, knowledge exchange, and training, sharing the very best in evidence-informed, ethical approaches, and also promoting quality in all areas of prevention, treatment, and quality care practice. If you've not done so already, please go ahead and visit our ISSUP website, issup.net, where you will find information on how to sign up for a free membership. The website has a wealth of resources, publications, and also new podcasts for you to enjoy. I'd like to thank the ISSUP staff for providing technical support for this event, and especially our colleague Kojo, our digital events coordinator, who has done an exceptional job to ensure everything runs smoothly behind the scenes. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. Please note that this webinar is in English, with interpretation available in French and Spanish. To use it, you can click on the interpreter icon in the bottom right corner of your screen and select your preferred audio language. Once selected, it will replace the main webinar audio. Also, you will have the opportunity to submit text questions to our presenters by typing your questions into the questions pane of the webinar interface on your screen. You may send your questions at any time during the presentation. We will collect these and address all of them during the Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. And if you miss anything, don't worry. A recording of this webinar will be made available for you to watch on demand after the event. And you can also share it with your network. We hope that you will stay with us for what promises to be an illuminating session. Now I'm delighted to introduce you to our webinar that presents the concept and purpose of the Investing in Evidence-Based Prevention, IEP workshop, a focused 5-hour learning initiative developed by ISSUP to strengthen decision-making in prevention. This workshop supports policymakers, decision-makers, and funders by offering the tools and shared language needed to make informed and sustainable prevention interventions. We are thrilled to have our presenters with us today, and I'm especially happy to be moderating this session as I've had the privilege of being involved with the IEP initiative from its very early stages. From being part of the early concept phase with our beloved late ISSUP colleague, Jeff Lee, and our dedicated expert, Rachele Donini, to supporting its development, implementation, and pilot analysis, alongside my colleague, Hala Najm, and the ISSUP scientific support team. Our presenter, Dr. Rachele Donini, is a psychotherapist who had led the drug prevention unit at the public local health agency in Italy. She has played a key role in major EU projects such as EDPQS, EUPC, and ASAP training. and is an EUDA certified EUPC trainer, master trainer, as well as a recognized leader in prevention science. Alongside her is my colleague at ISSUP, our scientific support coordinator, Hala Najm, an ICAP prevention credentialed professional, and an EU Drug Agency EUPC certified trainer. Hala brings extensive experience in scientific support and training and has been an invaluable partner in advancing prevention initiatives in the region. It has been incredibly rewarding to see the ISSUP idea grow into a structured program with real potential to strengthen prevention systems globally. We are confident that the insights from this workshop will be highly beneficial to our members around the world. It's my pleasure to hand over to you, Raquel and Hala. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Rasha, for your introduction about ISSUP, about ISSUP, and for introducing me too. So, and welcome to everybody who is attending the webinar. I hope, and I'm pretty sure you will find the webinar interesting on the matters of evidence-based prevention. So I'm going to share my screen right now. And because sharing doesn't allow me to see others, can you please tell me, Rasha, if the screen is available? Can you see my presentation?
Yes, we can see
it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so let's start. What is this workshop that we are talking about? As you can see, we already have a logo for ISSUP. ISSUP is investing in evidence-based prevention. This is the acronym of a two-session workshop addressed to funders, decision makers, and policy makers. So I'm Italian, and I like to start with the etymology of words that come from Latin. Italian comes from Latin, but also many words in English come from Latin. So I wanted to start by really trying to understand from the roots, from the etymology of words, why we chose with Jeff Lee and ISSUP this title, Investing in Evidence-Based Prevention. So the investment is a word that comes from Latin. It is built up of two little words, in and vestire. Vestire, veste, is the dress. In means to put on. So to put on a dress, to wrap or to cover something with a dress, adding value to that thing that we are covering. So an investment is something that we make to improve and to add value to something. So this helps us to get into the understanding of this workshop. We want to add value. To add value to what? Let's see. And then other two words, evidence-based. Evidence-based means that to prove something to be effective, we need to take actions, and we have to prove that that is really effective. And evaluation designs shows us how we can do that. RCTs, for example, that's the golden standard that really helps us understand how my intervention impacts on the final recipients. So here we are talking about, as Rasha said at the beginning, about prevention that is effective, that can help to change lives in better. And then we have prevention. This again is a Latin word. It is built up from these two words, pre, that means before, and venire, that means to come. So prevenire, It means to come before something happens. So putting together these words and really reflecting upon the etymology and the meaning of the words, we understand that investing in evidence-based prevention means acknowledging the need to give value and take action to implement prevention interventions and policies that have a positive impact on people's lives, promoting their health and preventing drug abuse. So here we are coming before what? Coming before drug abuse in this case. And then other two things, two sessions. This, we wanted to keep it brief. And this was something we really reflected upon because we are addressing a very busy target group. So it's 5 hours in total and workshop. So workshop, which is a meeting where a group of people engage in intensive discussion and activity on a particular subject or project. And here the subject is evidence-based prevention. So the idea here is to address this workshop to people that are funders, decision makers, and policy makers that have, of course, a very important and thorough background, and they have a lot to say about prevention. So the idea in the workshop is really to share their point of view and to discuss together, to have intensive discussions and activities on prevention. So once we got to understand the title of this workshop, let's see the origins. Where does this workshop come from? So the background comes from ISSUP. And here you can see Jeff Lee, that Rasha just recalled. Jeff Lee was the founder of ISSUP, and he had the idea to really look for a online prevention training to help national chapters to improve their understanding about evidence-based prevention. So he got in touch with the ISSUP content. ISSUP, which is Introduction to Evidence-Based Prevention, is an online training developed by CUNY University in Prague that was developed within a European project, the UPC ADAPT project. And here you can see all the main topics of this course. As you can see, substances, epidemiology, and then prevention science and evidence-based prevention interventions, and the different settings where prevention interventions take place, so family, school, workplace, community, environment, media, and the importance of monitoring and evaluation. So Jeff found this, and together with Jeff and in agreement with ISSUP, we developed the ISSUP Plus, which is a facilitated course, because ISSUP is a self-paced course, self-administered course online that can be taken remotely. But Jeff had the idea that something more was needed for people to really understand the contents. And so we did offer this plus, which is a facilitated understanding of those contents. And so in that way, ISSUP Plus was born. And here is one of the trainings on ISSUP Plus. ISSUP Plus, up to now, has run 5 cohorts from January 2021 to May 2024. 37 national chapters have been trained, and 13 in-country trainings have taken place, because the national chapters identified facilitators that could provide in-country training about ISSUP Plus. And it is about 30 hours of training, the INEP Plus course. So together with Jeff, after so many courts, we said yes. And it's very interesting because national chapters kept on asking and saying, our chiefs, our bosses should know about this. How can we reach out to them? So what happens when we have a busy target group that happens to be the ones who decide where to allocate resources and which prevention interventions and policies have to be implemented? So together with Jeff and ISSUP, we thought we had to develop a shorter course and to get in touch with that busy target group without asking so much time. And that workshop had to be concise and practical to really share scientific evidence to make informed decisions and allocate resources on what shows to be effective. And the need was also to convey the importance of relying on evidence and how this can be a good investment. So reflecting on this, after 1.5 years, almost 2, the IEP workshop was born, and these are the objectives. Define psychoactive substances, because we are addressing funders and policymakers and decision makers, and maybe not all of them know what is a psychoactive substances. So a few concepts about that. And then understand prevention science. What is evidence-based practices? What is an effective strategy? And recognize how investing, let's go back to the word, so covering prevention with this beautiful dress, which is evidence-based, this makes it with more value. And recognize how doing this helps to have cost effectiveness in the interventions we implement. Identify the key stakeholders and their roles, and hopefully bring them to the workshop. So in some way, this workshop is also a way to advocate for evidence-based prevention and provide funders, decision makers, and policymakers with practical tools and materials to help them take and make best decisions in prevention, and enable policymakers to review and develop policies that are aligned with best practices in prevention. What about the development? So first of all, together with Jeff, after reflecting upon INEP Plus, we said, well, okay, let's try to do this and really identify the core elements that can be helpful for this busy target group. So we took a search on internet for other similar courses. There was one from the CUNY University. It was an 8-hour course, but we thought it was too long. We needed something shorter. So we drafted a first idea of this workshop, and then we asked a little group of the target group of funders, decision and policymakers to volunteer and to gather in a focus group to understand if from their point of view this idea was a good idea, and if the topic could be of their interest, and how we could meet their expectation. So after the focus group, we refined the draft and we started defining the content, also based on their suggestions and the materials. And after we drafted all these materials, and with the support also of the scientific support team of ISSUP, we submitted the materials and the contents to several target group volunteers, asking them to review all the materials and offer suggestions. So after that, we had interviews to collect their feedback. And at that point, we finalized the content and materials based on the reviewers' feedback and also on the SST, the scientific support team feedback. And we went through other two important steps, but Hala will speak about this. We piloted the workshop, and after the piloting, we refined once again the whole contents, the whole materials, to really align with the feedback we received during the piloting. So these are the core components of the ISSUP workshop. The key terms and concepts. It's a glossary, and this glossary has really been rewritten. We wrote it together with Jeff and the SST, having in mind the target group, so funders, decision, and policymakers. We wanted a glossary that could speak to them, that was easy for them to be understood by. After this, the myths busted. Because we wanted the workshop to be short, we didn't have that much time. So the myths are a way to make scientific findings easy to understand and also accessible by providing very many different links to deepen the understanding of each specific myth and of each specific term that is in the glossary. And then another important material is the assessment checklist to help funders, decision makers, and policymakers to make informed decisions and allocate resources. And I think this is really important because in my experience, it happened, I did before ISSUP, there was a policymaker who asked me, what can I do to really allocate resources on what helps and what is effective? So I did explain a few things, and after that, many years after, during a congress, she said, now I have the understanding where I can allocate resources. I've been told what works and what does not work, and this really helped. So hopefully this is what the workshop would like also to do. This is the impact we are looking for, really, to make better decisions and to implement interventions that are effective. This is the structure. As we said, it's very short, 2 sessions. The first one is the introduction to prevention science. So we start with a round of introduction with our participant agreement. We share the objectives, and then we introduce mainly it's the international standards on drug use prevention and the EDPQS, the European Drug Prevention Quality Standards. This is the theoretical framework. And in session 2, prevention in action, collaborating for impact. So after setting the scientific framework here, we deep a little bit into the practical and the implementation aspect. So we have the knowledge tech activity to debunk prevention myths. Then we explore the multidisciplinary nature of prevention and the roles of various disciplines that are involved. And we present the assessment checklist to evaluate programs. So this is it from my side. And if any, here we have the Q&A session, and here is my email. Thank you.
Thank you, Raquel, for your presentation. I'll take it from here now, and we'll begin with the next part of the presentation. Let me just share my screen. All right. I hope you can all see my screen.
Yes.
Raquel, yes,
yes.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And great. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you all. Thank you once again for tuning in and for showing interest in this webinar. Just a quick recap about who I am. So my name is Hala Najm, and I work for ISSUP, as Rasha mentioned earlier, as a scientific support coordinator, but I also fill in the role of a training coordinator as part of ISSUP's newly established training unit. So to begin with, this webinar will not only about listening to new information, wonderful information about the IEP workshop, but it will also give you an opportunity to be part of the next steps in this initiative. So for the first time, at the end of this webinar, I'll be sharing with you a link or an MS form for you to fill in or to show interest in taking part in the upcoming IEP cohorts, which will take place in 2026. Obviously, if it fits your role and your interests. So as you listen in, I would really encourage you to ask yourself if this workshop is something that you'd like to be part of, or if you know someone who should be part of such a workshop. So taking over from Raquel gave a great overview about why the IEP workshop was developed, how it started, the origins of it, and how the workshops is actually structured. I will continue by explaining how this workshop links science, policy, and funding, and why that connection is so important for effective prevention systems. We'll then discuss the rationale for the target audience, decision makers, policy makers, and funders, which Raquel also touched base on. I'll outline the key competencies the workshop aims to build. I'll then give a very quick glimpse about the pilot and the key findings from that, and then we'll close with the next steps of the IEP workshop. So this slide is really about one simple idea. Prevention only works well when those three worlds talk to each other. So the first world we are talking about is science. And this is where, through research, we've learned what actually works, what does not work, and what might even be harmful in prevention. The second world is funding. And now that we know what works, there should be somebody who decides what to choose to invest in, right? So this is deciding which programs will get the money, which proposals will move forward, and which will not. And the third one, or the third component here, is the policy. And this is where those good funding decisions get turned into something that is stable, that is sustainable, and that is institutionalized through strategies, through guidelines, and eventually through standards, which actually creates those prevention systems that can outlast any individual project, no matter how strong that project is, or any person or people trying to push for that prevention or evidence-based prevention. So when those three are aligned, we're much more likely to support prevention that really makes a difference. And when they don't, and when they're disconnected, we can easily spend a lot of money on things that look really good, that are trendy, but they don't actually make any difference. So if we follow that chain, the chain that I just talked about, which is evidence, investment, and policy, the next question here would be, who really sits at the junction of these three components that I just mentioned? Who decides what gets funded, what eventually becomes policy? And this takes us to our next slide. Why this audience? So that's why this workshop was designed specifically for this audience, for decision makers, for funders, and for policymakers. These are mainly the people who sit in the middle of that chain, the chain that I just talked about. So they are basically the ones who decide whether evidence actually turns into investment or just stays on paper and on reports, and whether good investment decisions are later translated into policies and then into standards. So I say this from experience, and Raquel also touched base on this, and I'm sure many of you have experienced or at least have heard this from some prevention frontline workers from around the world. We know what works. We've been trained to know what works, but our leaders don't always speak the same language. And this is what Raquel just said. And this is not because those leaders or those funders or those decision makers, this is not because they don't care. It's because they're under pressure, they are short on time, as Raquel mentioned, and have rarely had the chance to actually learn about prevention science. Because most courses, prevention courses particularly, are simply too long for them to realistically commit to. Again, and this is just to reiterate what Raquel mentioned. So IEP came here, or was created, sorry, or was designed to close that gap, basically. So the idea here is very simple. If we can strengthen leadership and prevention through the decision makers, through the funders and the policy makers, we can influence prevention outcomes at scale with our trained professional prevention frontline workers. So this workshop, as I've mentioned, is really about sharpening the decisions behind prevention and not teaching people how to run activities on the ground specifically. So following these 5 or 6 hours, we'll discuss this at later stages, we really want participants to look at a prevention idea and quickly be able to tell, is this grounded in solid evidence? Or is it just a trend or a nice sounding program that is, we don't know where this will take us. We also want them to feel that they are equipped to make decisions by providing them with very simple tools that will help them determine which proposal deserves support and which should be declined. And some of these tools Raquel mentioned as well, which is the assessment checklist, for instance. We will discuss some others at later stages. So the third point, the third expected competency here, and this goes beyond individual projects. It's about seeing the bigger picture of prevention and how their choices as decision makers, funders, and opinion makers shape the whole prevention system, the standards they set as policymakers, the workforce they enable as employers and leaders in the field, and what gets sustained over time, what gets funded in a more in a prevention systems framework approach. So in other words, the IEP workshop, or the Investing in Evidence-Based Prevention workshop, is more about building confident, evidence-informed decision makers rather than technical implementers. The workshop basically focuses on strategic decision-making competencies, and this is very important, and this is what differentiates it from other workshops or other courses or trainings. So moving to the next level, which also Raquel had touched base on, which is the pilot. So for the pilot, we had asked our ISSUP national chapters to nominate people who sit at the decision-making tables. We ended up with 18 participants from 17 countries, and you can see their a screenshot of the training here. They were mostly mid to senior level professionals, and over 70% of them had more than 10 years of experience. Most of them wore several hats, which are decision makers, opinion makers mostly. We had policy makers, and we had one funder with us on the pilot. And something to highlight is that 80% of our pilot participants had already received prevention training, which we believe skewed our evaluation. Now, speaking about evaluation, we had 3 evaluation components. The first one was the pre-post test, the post-workshop satisfaction questionnaire, and the third was the focus group discussion. And I will elaborate briefly or in a very quick way on the results of each. So let me start with the pre-post test. So this confirmed that our group was a highly experienced and knowledgeable group in the field of prevention. as the average or the baseline score was 91%, and it was only increased by 4% at the end of the workshop. However, when asked whether they can apply what they have learned, nearly 40% said they couldn't. And this was a finding, indicating that they had the knowledge, but many of them still required practical follow-up support to translate this knowledge into practice. And this was mentioned in the focus group discussion as more time for them to implement the tools that they have acquired throughout the workshop. So we will discuss this once we present the focus group discussion results and how we address this at later stages, in a moment. So the next component is the post-workshop satisfaction questionnaire. And in terms of satisfaction, as you can see, we had 100% overall satisfaction rate, 89% were very satisfied, and we had the remaining 11% were somewhat satisfied. And all this 100% also reflected on the recommendation rate, which is 100% of them would recommend this workshop. As for the relevance, 94% of the participants felt that the content was relevant to their roles. So in the focus group discussion, participants also used those terms. The workshop was empowering, it was enriching, refreshing, and effective. Another quote from the focus group discussion as well, as one person said, it touched on most matters that would be required for effective advocacy and evidence-based decision-making. So all of this, the qualitative and the quantitative data, reassured us that the format and the content of the workshop were on the right track. Now moving to the third component, which is the focus group discussion, which was basically led by Russia and Livia. And we had 11 participants who participated and 2 participants who gave feedback later on an individual basis because they could not attend the focus group discussion. So this is where the project actually came to life, I would say. That's where we heard how the workshop landed for the people who actually sit on decision-making tables. So for the first key finding, a very strong theme came across, and that was cost effectiveness or saving on money is the language that opens doors to prevention investments. And that's the first point. And what participants said here or mentioned is that they had attended many technical trainings, but rarely ones that helped them discuss investment and returns of investment in this field. So this is a very unique thing for the investing in evidence-based prevention workshop. So basically, they appreciated being able to frame prevention not only as a good cause, but as a smart use of resources. And this is what decision makers, policymakers, leaders, and anyone who is in leadership position would want to hear, how to make use of the resources that I have. So the second point, or the second key point, I would say, from the focus group discussion is that participants wanted more time to unpack frameworks and link them to action. And this is what I mentioned earlier, and we are here now. So the UN ODC standards table was a good example for that, and it is one of the tools that we gave our participants. So one person said here, I would need more time. There were colors, and we couldn't talk too much about this table. And I would love to learn more about what kind of programs to implement. So based on this feedback, all of this feedback, the quantitative and the qualitative feedback that we collected, we have simplified the language, we made the frameworks visually clearer, and we strengthened even more the advocacy component of the training, because as the first point here mentioned, framing prevention as a smart investment was something that really was highlighted. So we highlighted this even more by adding an advocacy guidance sheet, which includes some research about the return on investment of prevention programs and some other advocacy frameworks and tools that they can use to advocate for evidence-based prevention. And we are still considering a 6-hour workshop instead of a 5-hour one to give participants more space to ask questions, to get more guidance from the trainers, and to share their real-world experience. And this is what enriches actually a workshop. But this is still under consideration. So moving to the next step, we are done with the focus group discussion, we're done with the content, we're done with the pilot, we collected all the data, we strengthened our material, and now we are moving to the next steps. And this is here is where your role will be. We really want in the next steps to make the IEP workshop accessible to our global network, and we will be rolling out at least 10 cohorts in 2026. So we are preparing the workshop in multiple languages. So we have it already in English. We are translating it to French and to Spanish, and the Italian version is already being rolled out with Raquel, since she mentioned she's from Italy. So she is already rolling it out in Italy. And the aim is basically so that more decision makers, funders, and policymakers can access this material, this workshop at a global scale. So the slide that some of you might be waiting for after my my introductory introduction to this part of the presentation. So we are looking for policymakers, decision makers, or funders in mid to senior level roles with limited exposure to prevention science, who can commit to 6 hours of live online training. So if that fits your profile, or if you know someone who does, please, you can scan the QR code, and I believe Kojo is also sharing the link via the chat. Please fill in this MS Forms, this Microsoft Forms, and if your profile matches what we are looking for, we will definitely be in touch with you, and we look forward to that, in fact. So I will leave the QR code for another couple of minutes. I would like to thank you for staying with us and for tuning in once again. And I believe it is time for the Q&A now with Rasha. So Rasha,
Yes.
back to you.
Thank you so much, Hala and Raquel, for the excellent, rich, and oriented presentation. It was great to see how clearly you explained the ISSUP workshop purpose and the insights gained from the pilot phase. As you said, Hala, we are now going to begin answering the questions. As a reminder, you can still submit questions through the questions pane. So we are looking forward to receiving any additional question you have. So let's get right into the first question. How can prevention be applied when a substance use situation has already worsened?
So shall I start?
Yes, please go ahead, Raquel.
Okay. So thank you for the question. We know prevention, and we have explained the meaning of the word coming before. Coming before is always possible. Also, when we have a drug abuse situation that has worsened. And this means that instead of applying universal prevention, we refer to selective prevention or to indicated prevention. And if that is not enough, we can help the person go to treatment. And also there, treatment is something that can prevent getting the situation worse. So I would really like to offer this horizon. It's always possible to do something. Also, when something that started just as an experimental way, especially in adolescence. We know it is quite common that teenagers start in a way that is an experimental way to use drugs. It can turn into a drug abuse, and then, unfortunately, it can turn also into an addiction. But please know that it's always possible to do something. And so this is true for prevention, this is true for treatment, and there's always something we can prevent on getting worse. So this is my response, my answer, and I don't know, Ala, if you would like to add something to this.
I think you summed it up really nice. Thanks, Raquel.
Thank you,
always
Raquel.
a horizon. On a positive note, there's always a horizon.
Thank you both. It adds important perspective on how prevention fits into more complex or advanced cases. We've received several great questions in the questions pane. Here's the next one. Prevention is formalized. Only prevention programs from government agencies are recognized. Private initiatives and NGOs are rarely considered. Also, budget is an important key item. What do you think?
Shall I start again, Ala, or you want to start?
Go ahead, go ahead. I'm just finding the question so that I read through it again. So please go ahead.
So, well, it depends. Probably the person who asked this question comes from a country where there are governmental programs that are set and that don't allow NGOs to implement. But this is not true for all countries. In Italy, for example, we have a strategic action plan on drugs, and we have evidence-based interventions. But this doesn't really mean that only these interventions are implemented. And when we were building the ISSUP workshop together with Jeff, we really did rely on our experience also about the questions we received. And the questions we received came from very many different organizations and bodies. So there are private sectors, NGOs, that implement prevention interventions. Some do it very well because they refer to scientific evidence. Some tailor in a homemade way their interventions, and these are based, of course, on good intentions. I'm not saying they are based on bad intentions, but we know that a good intention is not enough. We really need to rely on evidence. So the myths which is really a material, a core component of the workshop, because we don't have that much time to explain. So debunking the myths is very important. For example, information. Many people think that giving information on drugs is a prevention, a good prevention intervention. But the scientific evidence shows that relying only on information can not only be ineffective, but it can be harmful. So people who tailor by themselves their own interventions may not know this. And I still present these questions. I'm going in about 1 hour to meet in a municipality to speak about adolescence and prevention. And I'm going to propose a few of those myths, and I've already done that. And what I always hear is that people think that information is great, that increasing self-esteem in a prevention intervention is great. And but this too is another thing that by itself alone can be harmful, because we have to keep in mind the developmental stage of our final recipients. And Usually they are adolescents, and we know adolescents are sensation seekers. So they might have a very high self-esteem and think they can control everything, also drugs. And we know this is not true. So we have to be careful also with handling self-esteem. Or another thing, bringing testimonials into schools to speak about their lived experience. Well, this can help in treatment, but in prevention, it can be harmful again. So this is why I'm saying, and about the question, not all countries have these evidence-based interventions embedded in a governmental strategy. So this is why it's important, because in many countries, there's still the possibility to just go into a school and bring your own intervention. And then the second part of the question, budget. Of course, budget is really important. And for many years, prevention has been the Cinderella of all services. Now, probably, I'm speaking for Italy in this case, but also for other European countries, there is a little bit more understanding of prevention as an investment. So slowly, very slowly, something is changing. But of course, budget is important, but we have to be careful not to hide behind the lack of resources for not doing things, because sometimes we do things and that is a way to spend money, and we do things that don't help. So let's really use the resources we have, implementing interventions that show to be effective. And budget investment, I forgot to say while I was presenting, is not just money. Resources are money, is the time, is the effort, are the energies, are the spaces, the logistics. So investment means a lot of things, not just money. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Raquel.
Raquel.
I know that Hala
Sorry.
wants to
Yes,
add
just
to
a
your
few words on this question so that we move on to the next. I know that we are short on time now. Just as Raquel mentioned, for instance, in our country, in Lebanon, our country, as in Russia and I, we both come from Lebanon, the concept of government taking the lead is not quite the usual. It's more about NGOs who get those evidence-informed programs, they get the funding, and they partner with the government. So partnership here between the private sector, the public sector, and the not-for-profit sector is very important to move things forward. And the importance of partnership here with the government is the institutionalization part that we had mentioned. So as I mentioned again in the presentation, our frontline workers, prevention workers, are very well trained, but our leaders are not very well trained. And here comes the role of the IEP. So back to you, Rasha. Apologies for interrupting you.
Thank you, Hala. We'll have one more question because we are very short on time. It's about the adaptation for different regions. With the upcoming Italian, Spanish, and French versions, do you think that some of the aspects will need adaptation? If so, what aspects? And what elements remain universal?
So I think as a start, we will also start by piloting the different versions, the different versions in the different languages, so that we have a better understanding of how that flows to their contexts, and from there we can see if we will need adaptation. Obviously, this has a global context. The IEP workshop has a global context, so there will be minor adaptations. It's more about so Raquel, let me just say that Raquel gave all of you a sneak peek to the material, and she just gave 3 myths and 3 different information, or 3 pieces of information that are greatly discussed in the structure or in the content of this workshop. So generally, it's about science. The adaptation is minimal, but it will be more about linguistics rather than the content. So this is quickly said. Maybe we can take another question.
Yes, thank you, Hala, for this insightful, clear, and quick answer. I'll have it's generating a lot of interest, and I know we will not be able to answer all the questions, but let's take one more question regarding what qualities define effective leadership in prevention work?
Raquel, would you like to go, or can I?
You go, and then I'll follow.
Okay, so I think I would say three main ones. First of all, listen to trained frontline workers and the community. What are they saying? What are they telling me? Because I've sent them as a leader to get trained, and they come back with more information that they want to implement, and I should follow that. I should listen to that. Another one is, I would say, can translate this science to other people or to other initiative or to whatever. So translating science and evidence-based practice into practice itself, and more on the systems thinking rather than thinking on a project basis. Effective leaders in this field should think about how to make prevention more widely available rather than try to find funds for a project or another. So institutionalization again, and not working in silos, working evidence with funding and with policy together, as mentioned earlier. Raquel, if you'd like to add anything.
Thank you, Ala. Yes, I think that leadership means a lot of things, and it also means being in a specific role in the prevention system. I also agree with the fact that prevention system is another important ingredient of prevention effectiveness. So it is the workforce professionalization, it is the kind of prevention interventions that are evidence-based, but it is also a prevention system that works. So what we did, for example, with a European project called the ISSUP Training Project, Analysis of Systems and Professional Training, we mapped the people that were in leading positions that could really have an impact on the prevention system because of their decisions and their possibility to allocate resources. So I think these are the people that hopefully can be trained and that are willing to be trained in order to make decisions that are based on evidence. So it's not just about a good prevention intervention, it's not just about a good trainer or a good professional. It is also about a good and linked prevention system. And all these ingredients together really can help to empower prevention policies and interventions. Thank you.
Thank you, Raquel and Hala, for this thoughtful response. I got the green light to have 10 more minutes, so it's good that we can answer more questions. The next question is, what role does policy advocacy play in strengthening prevention leadership?
So as I said about ISSUP, I think really ISSUP is a way to advocate and to really involve funders, policymakers and decision makers in a way that can hopefully help them to make better decisions and allocate resources. So advocacy is an advocacy for evidence-based prevention. We need to understand that it's not just about doing something, which is mainly, somebody else just called me next week. I'm going to go into school, and the principal of the school asked me to speak, to address the students. There are about 1,200 with the effects of drugs. So I'm going to meet this principle. I'm not going to say it doesn't make sense. I know it doesn't make sense, but this is not the right way to approach. I'm going to have a chat, trying to understand what he needs and putting together his needs with my competence, my professional competence. We are going to build together something that is sustainable and impactful. We don't want these students to go and try, after my intervention, to go and try new substances, because we know this is what happens. So advocacy is important. It's also taking the opportunity in these cases, when we are addressed with these kind of questions, to really engage and explain, because we are the experts, but not everybody knows about what works in prevention. But it is good really to take the hook. This person gave me the hook, so I'm going to take this and as a chance to really explain face to face what prevention science has to say about this. And hopefully this will change, will shift the question. I had this same question by a law enforcement officer. He wrote to the service asking to give the name of a person who had recovered from substance use disorders, because he wanted this person to go with him in school and say and tell what was his experience in this. And again, I knew this wasn't good, but I said, okay, let's meet, let's talk about this. And after doing that, he said, okay, I'm not the expert. Please tell me what I can do. And we did it together. He was a law enforcement officer playing a very important role about mafia, for example, and going into school, telling students what it means to buy cannabis from a pusher, how this really empowers all the traffic in narcotics. So we built the intervention together, and he played his role, that was his, and I played another role. So I think that we can really find the way through. We just have to be available really to negotiate and chat and discuss, because not everybody knows this. Sometimes the findings from prevention science are counter, they're not so automatically understood. They are counterintuitive. So we need to explain why they work, why prevention works that way. Thank you.
Really appreciate that answer, Raquel. It really helps to clarify how these concepts strengthen prevention based on science. Now, building on this discussion, here's another question, and the final one, I think. When we identify areas and issues that function as risk factors or security factors or protective factors, let's say, it's not possible to address them because the response is to the current political climate, which obviously has other priority issues. What do you think?
Hala, would you like to say something, or you are muted?
Yes, you're muted, Hala.
Yes, apologies. I'm trying to find the question because it's a long one. It has several components. But
Maybe
so
I start and you follow?
Yes, please.
Yeah, well, through the INEP Plus course with Jeff, we did meet facilitators from the national chapters that really rose this issue. There are countries where drug consumption is illegal. Well, it is illegal also in Italy, for example, for cannabis and for other drugs. But there are countries where the use and the abuse is condemned in a very strict way, and there's nothing to do, and it's not considered as a disease or a problem that needs treatment. It's just about law enforcement. So these people are often imprisoned, incarcerated. So in these countries, we really need to take into account what is the system, the legal system also. And but of course, the professionals working in prevention and treatment usually have a different understanding of the problem. So the point here is to slowly change the approach to drug use and to understand it as a disorder and not a moral problem or a crime problem. We have to distinguish. So we have to really understand the particular environment and setting where we are operating. And I remember there was one of the questions that Hala answered about the adaptation. ISSUP has to be adapted. For example, I translated everything into Italian together with Casa Rosetta. And I thought that one of the adaptation, for example, is to use examples from the country where we want to implement the course, or also refer to studies from that country, because what you will find in ISSUP is usually from the States, from Europe, from the Western countries, but probably there is also something from Africa, from Asia, that we didn't take into account. So this is another kind of adaptation that we need to do. And also the legal framework is another important ingredient that we have to take into account. Thank you.
Thank you, Raquel. Hala, you want to add anything?
Yes, so basically just answering the question itself, it's about what technically we call the vulnerability matrix. So we are trying to touch base on security issues and risk factors that we don't have control with. What we should do is basically strengthen the positive or the protective factors in the different ways that Raquel has mentioned. So just having the balance, or trying to think about how we can balance those risk factors with much more protective factors that would make way for the participants to divert from risky behaviors, and not only substance use particularly. And again, I go to partnership in this and partnering with the law enforcement, as Raquel mentioned. But just so that we don't misunderstand the IEP rollout in 2026, Raquel, it will be at a global level. We will not have country-based rollouts. So it will be French for all French speaking at a global level. So the adaptation will not be country-based. It will be a global adaptation rather than country-based. But if at later stages we will be rolling it out at country level, then definitely there will be country-specific adaptations to be made. So just a quick clarifications before we receive many country-specific national chapters wanting to do it for their own countries. So thank you for that. Back to you, Rasha.
Thank you, Hala, and thank you, Raquel. I see you expressed it quite well, and that I feel that it's a fantastic point to end on. Thank you again for answering all the questions and for the great presentations. It was a pleasure to have you with us. I want to remind you all to fill the form, please, if you are interested in participating in the next workshop. I just sent it in the chat. This concludes the webinar. Thank you all for attending. We hope you learned something new and enjoyed our presentations. You will receive a follow-up email within 24 to 48 hours with a link to view a recording of today's webinar. We always appreciate your feedback and suggestions, so please use the link in the follow-up email to fill out the feedback survey. On behalf of ISSUP and our presenters, thank you for joining us today and have a great rest of your day.
Goodbye. Thank you, Rasha. Thank you, Ala.
Thank you. Thanks for
Bye-bye.
coming. Take care.
Bye.